Australian Queensland Senator Macolm is at the forefront of cracking of the immense fraud and deceit that is COVID. You're about to see him make an astonishing speech in the Australian Parliament calling for a royal commission. This is a parliamentary commission of inquiry with subpoena powers. He refers to the TGA, which is the Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration. It's the equivalent of the US CDC, Center for Disease Control. They all colluded in a military operation to coerce and force a bioweapon on populations using fear, propaganda, censorship, and coercion. Did an international cross-border medical military countermeasures consortium run COVID? It appears it did. COVID was a military assault operation, as you're about to hear. The Australian, American, British, and Canadian military forces formed the consortium to dominate the manufactured COVID threat response. Australia joined the consortium in 2012 under the Australian Labor-Gillard government. The truth is now coming out. There is a military pharmaceutical apparatus linking the USA, Australia, Canada, and the UK to assault their populations with full-spectrum military operations. It's a war. Operation Warp Speed was the U.S. Department of Defense first contract between the U.S. government and Pfizer for the purchase of $11 billion worth of vaccines, which is the private enterprise profit half of the operation. So what was the military mission and goal? It was to cull the population with vaccines that would kill some immediately with side effects and induce slow deaths in others, which we're now seeing and are being ignored. Ultimately, the operation was about control, erosion of freedoms, and ushering in new totalitarian reforms which restrict everyday freedoms, erosion of privacy, disappearance of cash replaced with digital control of money to buy or sell, and coming is your restriction of movement with 15-minute cities, ULEZ, and carbon caps on your everyday spending. That's what this war is about. They knew you'd never tolerate this without a manufactured threat and emergency where you'd exchange freedom and liberty for security and willingly relinquish your rights and freedoms to accept the inevitable of a new normal post-COVID world where you'd own nothing and be happy on their terms. Now watch Senator Roberts blow the lid off this military operation that your government's green-lighted. We're at war, and you are the enemy. You'd better wake up. You're not going to like the open prison they're constructing for you. This putrid and rancid festering sore needs to be opened up with a sterile scalpel of a public inquiry. It's the first step to pushing back on the war they've declared on us. Our freedom is at stake. They are the enemy. They no longer represent us. A total purge is needed.
Call the bloody Royal Commission now! Now in the public domain indicates the COVID response was not initiated through commercial interests, rather through an organisation called the Medical Countermeasures Consortium that Australia joined in 2012. According to their webpage on Australia's defence.gov.au website, the Medical Countermeasures Consortium is a four-nation partnership involving the Defence and Health Departments of Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom and the United States. Quote, the consortium seeks to develop medical countermeasures to assist with chemical and biological threats affecting civilian and military populations and on emerging infectious diseases and pandemics. Medical countermeasures include drugs, vaccines and diagnostics. End of quote. Who knew we had a military pharmaceutical apparatus linking the United States, Australia, Canada and the UK in place since the Gillard Labor government? An AUKUS for pandemics. The consortium maintains a compensation scheme for people injured as a result of taking a countermeasure. Compensation claims were accepted for the 2009 H1N1 vaccine, the anthrax vaccine and flu vaccines. The Medical Countermeasures Unit within the United States Department of Defence has been in the vaccine business for many years and has been injuring people for many years and getting away with it. So it should come as no surprise that the Department of Defence signed the first contract between the United States government and Pfizer for the purchase of $11 billion worth of vaccines. The American Department of Defence. President Trump gave the order to the Department of Defence to commence vaccine development and even gave it a cool name, Operation Lightspeed. President Trump reacted, as we in this place reacted, on the best of intentions and the worst of data. Intelligence was used that our security apparatus knew, or should have known, was wrong. Videos from China of people dropping dead have proven to be fakes, produced with the assistance of Chinese intelligence, and they may not have acted alone. These videos should not have made it to the decision-making process in the West. How that happened How so much fraudulent information was offered to elected members is a matter for a royal commission. The United States has already started multiple congressional hearings and fraud and court cases that will eventually yield the truth. Australia must play its part in this process. That's our part in this process, for we are truly all in this together to the very end. There are doors to be kicked down, and at this time it will not be the doors of everyday Australians guilty of no crime, who merely spoke the truth on social media. The United States' response to COVID brought the Medical Countermeasures Consortium into the process at a very, very early stage. Australia's military were involved early, providing assistance including crowd control, border quarantine, contact tracing and medical personnel, things one would expect the military to help with. Former Prime Minister and profligate officeholder Scott Morrison shuttered the COAG system because it was open and transparent, COAG being the Council of Australian Governments. COAG was not just a single meeting. COAG was a secretariat with committees, including a health committee, liaising across local councils, state and federal government. Although not a constitutional instrument, this COAG structure was very well positioned to administer our COVID response. Why was it abolished and replaced with a military pharmaceutical apparatus? I hope the Royal Commission asks that question. In place of COAG, Mr Morrison created a secretive so-called National Cabinet consisting only of the state premiers and territory chief ministers. What was the secret so important that a well-functioning apparatus like COAG had to be demolished and the truth gagged for 30 years? Mr Morrison then appointed a serving military officer, Lieutenant General Fruin, to run Australia's vaccine rollout, rebranded as, wait for it, Operation COVID Shield. The United Kingdom responded to COVID in March of 2020 with a massive military operation called Operation Rescript. This moved 23,000 military personnel into a new unit called the COVID Support Operation under British powers known as Military Aid to Civilian Authorities, MACA. Command of this large military force remained with the military. And Canada? What of Canada? Canada called in the Canadian Armed Forces with, quote, unprecedented measures. Their words, not mine, under Operations Laser and Vector. It's clear the Medical Countermeasures Consortium agreement that the Gillard Labor government signed in 2012 was designed to make pandemic response a military operation, not a civilian health operation. This should have been clear in July 2021 when Major General Fruin took to the microphone in full military uniform. Australia saw military checkpoints at borders, military guarding medical facilities, military and their hardware on the streets of Sydney and Melbourne, locking people in their homes. All of this created a climate of fear and intimidation that facilitated acceptance of the COVID injection. Was this the plan? Has the pharmaceutical industry now donned fatigues? Did our civilian health authorities stand up for established medical principles based on the Hippocratic Oath to prescribe only beneficial treatments? No, they did not. We know our Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, did not review the Pfizer Stage 2-3 clinical trial data and instead relied on the American FDA's paperwork. We know the FDA didn't review the data and instead took Pfizer's word for how the trials went. Surely the TGA knew this. If it did, the TGA is complicit. If it didn't know, the TGA is hopelessly or willfully negligent. Misfeasance. Pfizer committed systemic fraud during their clinical trials, with whistleblowers revealing only healthy adult participants were recruited for a Stage 2-3 clinical trial of a vaccine that was intended for the sick and elderly. Trial duration was grossly insufficient to capture medium and long-term side effects like myocarditis. To drown out the number of adverse events being recorded among real participants, fake participants were created who recorded zero side effects. Patients who suffered serious side effects were removed from the study and never existed in the paperwork. The COVID injection was not tested on pregnant women, and women who fell pregnant were removed from the study before childbirth. The COVID injection was then recommended for pregnant women. How could any human do this? This is inhuman, and it's monsters that did it. Why did Pfizer think they could get away with the most crooked clinical trial in history? Could an answer to this question be found in testimony of a Pfizer executive to US Congress who made a comment that Pfizer gave the US government the vaccine the government asked for and so claims Pfizer is not liable for the adverse events? The military appears to have been involved in the cover-up of COVID's origins. It's now clear that COVID was developed during gain-of-function research in China's Wuhan Institute for Virology, connected with the Chinese military. And who funded this research in China? The United States National Institutes for Health under Anthony Fauci. Canada and Australia were involved in this research. In 2020, the CSIRO put out a press release not only admitting their gain-of-function research, CSIRO defended it, and I've spoken on that previously. After a series of lab escapes involving pathogens at America's Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC headquarters in Georgia, President Obama in 2014 suspended gain-of-function research. Anthony Fauci ignored the President's order and moved the research offshore to Wuhan, China. Gain-of-function research is countermeasure research. It's the same process of finding and manipulating pathogens to produce a new virus, a Frankenstein virus. Once the virus is deadly enough, a vaccine is prepared, then the whole thing put on a shelf in case an enemy or nature deploys that virus. Once the virus appears in the population, vaccines can be deployed. At a price, of course, because after all, this is corporate United States racked with parasitic globalist predators. In the early stages of COVID development and escape, did our medical countermeasures apparatus act independently of government? This is a question for a Royal Commission. Did anyone in this country accept orders from the United States military to do or not do a thing that may have interfered with this military pharmaceutical plan? Another question for a Royal Commission. Let me be clear. Australia has a long and enviable history of using our military to assist in civilian disasters to the benefit of all. If the need arises, again, we should not hesitate to allow our military to help out again. The military, though, should not be used against law-abiding civilians or against healthy civilians for the purposes of forced injection to transfer wealth to Big Pharma. What we saw was forced injection of people after succumbing to the threat of deprivation of their family's livelihood and the ability to feed children. Fear, intimidation, blackmail, threats of loss of income and home are elements of force. Inhuman force. I have repeatedly said that COVID was severely mismanaged because it was never about health. It was about control of people and wealth transfer using deceit. Deceit that's inhuman, monstrously inhuman. We must know whether our TGA is, in waving through a vaccine countermeasure that would not have been approved under normal circumstances, bowed to higher powers. Was this a military pharmaceutical operation or a civilian health operation? These are matters ordinarily dealt with in a Royal Commission. The Albanese Labor government broke its pre-election promise to have a Royal Commission. If it continues to break its promise, it will be complicit in hiding truth from the people. Truth that is slowly yet relentlessly and inevitably coming out. Call the bloody Royal Commission now!